What up, Profligers? Welcome back to my channel. Today is Saturday, the 21st of March, 2020, and it's 3 weeks after the 2020 elections in Guyana. And today I want to give you my opinion of this election cycle. Now, this has been the most controversial election in Guyana. You know, Guyana has been always divided along racial lines, and this elections has proven to be a racial census, just as it has been in the past 4 decades. So Guyana's always had a race problem because 42% of the population is Indian, and the rest is, of course, not Indian. And after the 2015 elections, when the current coalition was formed, it is somehow difficult or impossible mathematically for a race-based election cycle to be victorious. But this, of course, was not learned. This is not a lesson that is learned by the current crop of politicians, but I will give you my assessment and bring you up to date on where we are today, 3 weeks after the 2020 election cycle. Stay tuned.
Oh, this is my day. I'm ready to take it on, come what may.
Okay, so for my international followers who are not present in Guyana and who have not been keeping up to date with the elections in Guyana, but who have been following the developments as far as the oil and gas industry, this elections was really a battle for control of the oil and gas industry in Guyana. And I'm going to address that later on to bring you up to date on what is happening with the oil and gas sector after this video. But here's what happened in the last 3 months. So for those of you who do not know, Guyana has 10 administrative districts or regions, 10 regions, and each of those 10 regions has now a local government. And so there are local government elections in each region, and so the elections are contested nationally and regionally in the form of local government elections. And this elections was a contest for both national and regional positions in the national government and the local governments. So there were 11 political parties in this election cycle. 11 of them contested, or 11 of them participated in the campaigns, but only 9 of them made it to election day and were featured on the ballots. Of those nine political parties, 2 of them are the main political parties. The main political party that represents the Indian population in Guyana is the PPPC, the People's Progressive Party Civic, which represents an earlier coalition of the People's Progressive Party and the Civic component. This party has a general secretary in the form of Mr. Bharat Jagdeo, and he selected their presidential candidate, Mr. Irfan Ali. The second major political party is now a coalition of 5 political parties, that is the APNU, AFC, and 3 other smaller parties. Their presidential candidate is Mr. Brigadier David Granger. And so campaigns were conducted along racial lines. But like I said before, it's difficult to win an election along racial lines in Guyana because there is no one race that has a majority of the population. And so from the beginning, I predicted that there would be an even divide of the parliament again, almost exactly like it was before this elections and what caused the no confidence motion of 2018. And that is exactly what has happened, what has played out at the end of this election cycle. But let me bring you up to date on where we are today. So what was new about the 2020 election cycle is that there were several new political parties. As a matter of fact, there were about 9 new political parties, and these are some of those parties. There was the LJP, that is Liberty and Justice Party, which is essentially an Amerindian party. Right, so the presidential candidate for the LJP was Mr. Lennox Schumann, who is a Tushao from one of the Amerindian communities in Guyana, and we're going to get back to him and the way he represented his constituency a little later. Second party was the Change Guyana party. This is the party of Mr. Badal, Robert Badal, who is the general manager, the main investor in the Pegasus Hotel Group. So that new building that is going up in Kingston that I've been showing updates of over the past 6 months, that building is under the management of Mr. Robert Badal, and he contested this election as a presidential candidate of the Change Guyana political party. And then there was a New United Guyana. A New United Guyana is one of those splinter groups that came out of the People's Progressive Party Civic. So their presidential candidate was in fact Mr. Ralph Ramkaran, who was a previous member of the PPPC party. Then there was the TMI, that is not too much information, but the New Movement, which is a consortium or a group of Guyanese professionals, mainly young people who are in the health sector and perhaps a few engineers and so on. And then there was the Fed Up Party, that is the Federal United Party, which is a Berbice party. So it's a party mainly of that contested the regional elections in Region 6, because their founders were from Region 6. They did not have a presidential candidate in this election cycle because the founders apparently were all dual citizens, and dual citizens are not allowed to contest or to be members of parliament in Guyana. And then there were 2 religious parties, and then there was the People's or the United Republican Party, which I believe did not contest the elections because the general elections, because their candidate is also a dual citizen. So a number of these parties had problems fielding a political presidential candidate because their members were dual citizens of Guyana and the United States or Canada. And in this group, this category of people, every party had this problem. So the leader of the Labour and Justice Party, Mr. Schumann, is a Canadian citizen and was required to give up his citizenship, and I don't know if that was completed, but that is part of the controversy of this election cycle and the reason why some of these political parties did not make it all the way to the contested general election to present a presidential candidate in the general elections. Okay, so let's talk about the final component of this whole elections machinery, and that is GCOM, the Guyana Elections Commission, which is a constitutional body. It's supposed to be an independent body that is tasked with conducting elections in Guyana. Now, this body is made up of a chairperson that is selected by the opposition and agreed to by the leader or the leader of the governing party. This person was selected and is a former legal officer, Justice Claudette Singh. In addition to this, there are 6 members of the Guyana Elections Commission, 3 of which are selected by the opposition and 3 of which are selected by the ruling party. And so these 7 members comprise the Guyana Elections Commission, and they are responsible for conducting free and fair elections in Guyana. So this is supposed to be a unbiased group, since they are equal numbers of members from the 2 leading parties, and there is a Chief Justice that is agreed on by both parties to be chairman of the Guyana Elections Commission. So the question is, why are there problems now in March 2020 after this arrangement has been made and the count of the election. So this is what happened. Let me give you my impression of what happened. This is my view, my observation from what happened after March 2nd of March 2020, after election day. So GCOM, Guyana Elections Commission, started to declare the counts by allowing the summary and signed copies of each count to be reported by a reporting officer. That means for each region, a reporting officer was required to collect all of the summary of the counts from each point of polling, each polling station where a count was conducted, and an official document called, so the official document is a statement of the poll, the SOP, which was reported by each polling station. Those documents were collected and reported to GCOM, and GCOM decided to release them by region, starting with the least populous regions. And so they started releasing regions 1 to 10, except region 4, which is the most populous region and which was left for last. Now, while they were doing this, if you were following the count, you would have seen that the PPP was in a large lead. In other words, because of the order in which the count was released by GCOM, this gave a large lead to the PPPC. But by the time you get to region 4, which is more than 45% of the population and more than 45% of the votes in any given election, controversy had developed. So 9 regions had been released, had been reported, showing that the PPP was leading by about 50,000 votes or so, and the PPP stopped the count. Now, why did this happen? So this is my assessment of what happened. Because of the order in which the count was declared by GCOM, the Guyana Elections Commission, it gave the PPPC a large lead of about 50,000 votes. So by the time Region 4 was the only outstanding region to be released, the PPPC had declared that they had won, because they declared that no elections in history has ever been able to overcome a 50,000 lead in votes. So they were prepared to declare victory based on the first 9 regions to be released, except region 4. And so they started creating this narrative that elections would be rigged if they did not win, because they had this massive lead, and therefore they are entitled to win by a landslide. Now, this is of course false, because the largest region is region 4, and the largest number of votes comes from region 4. So like I said, it's my opinion that the PPPC tried to bias the outcome, that is the expectations of the outcome of these elections, by declaring that they had won the elections, or that they could not lose these elections because they were ahead by 50,000 votes. And that is merely a result of the order in which the election results were released by GCOM. Now, Region 4 votes were delayed even before irregularities in the counts started to appear. So there are problems with the order in which the votes were reported, but the Region 4 count showed irregularities because the returning officer of Region 4 started to deviate from the standard practice that had been pursued by the previous returning officers from the various regions. Now we can go into the reasons why that was so, but this is what happened. Because of a delay, the PPPC decided to release their count for Region 4, which showed that they had won by about 17,000 votes. This put pressure on the coalition government to release their side of their count, which showed that they had won Region 4 by more than 50,000 votes, and therefore they had won the general election by about 6,000 votes. So this is where we are. The PPP declared that this was rigging, the elections were rigged. The coalition government declared that their count was right. And then, after about a day or so, the official count from GCOM was released. Remember, after this irregularity in the reporting by Region 4 officer, in this case, the infamous Mr. Mingo, where he's deviated from the standard practice of reporting the counts one polling station at a time using the SOPs. So using the statement of polls, what was happening before is that they were reporting each statement of poll one at a time and eventually arriving at a total count for Region 4. However, what Mr. Mingo decided to do is to use a spreadsheet. And so this is where all the controversy started. So when the first count for Region 4 was released, the party, the PPPC, filed an injunction that got the count to be annulled. Then the second count was released after a few days after they had passed through the courts. And this count showed, again, more than a 50,000 vote win by the coalition government, but about 6,000 votes different between the first release from GCOM and the second release from GCOM. And I believe that is where grounds for a recount is called. But however, the whole situation is now embroiled in massive conflict and controversy, because since then there has been violence, there has been protests in the streets. One man was killed. In fact, he attacked the police with a machete and injured a couple of police officers, and then backup police officers came, shot him, and he died. So this is the situation in Guyana right now with the elections count. We are still awaiting a recount, which is being held up by both political parties, both the PPPC and the APNUFC, that is, both the coalition government and the PPPC are denying a recount. This is after CARICOM was called in. That is, there was an agreement between the president and the chairman of the PPPC that a total recount would be conducted, and they enlisted the help of the CARICOM secretariat, that is, the leader of CARICOM, to come in and to supervise the count. Somebody filed an injunction against this, and so that count was abandoned. So here we are, 21st of March 2020, still awaiting the final results from the 2020 election cycle in Guyana. This is my take on what happened. Tell me what you've been hearing. A lot of lies, misinformation have been circulating, but this is my take. My take is that the election results are statistically a tie. So guys, there you have it. This is my take on what happened in this election cycle in Guyana. Leave your comments below. Tell me what you've heard. There's a lot of misinformation and a lot of lies circulating. And remember, all of this is about oil and gas industry and a battle for control of the wealth that Guyana is about to receive from the oil and gas industry. But since these elections have been conducted, the oil industry has collapsed. Right? The prices of oil has collapsed. The prices of oil have collapsed, and it's now trading around $20 a barrel. So there's not really a whole lot to fight over. But this is the situation in Guyana. Tell me what you've heard. Leave your comments below. Let the fight begin. Remember, be respectful of other people's views and opinions. Nobody is right about this. This is just politics, right? And the reason why I've retained my comments so far is because you're not going to resolve this in the comments below. All you're going to do is display what your points of view are. So let me know what you think. Remember to share this video with friends and family around the world. Like and subscribe. Let people know what's happening in Georgetown, Guyana. Later.
Bright flowers in her hair, and the band is blowing reggae beats double time to the people in the streets. People swaying back and forth, smiles upon their face. Frantic moment everywhere as the song sinks into the soul.
outside, and why did you choose to come with your traditional wear today?
Well, I'm standing outside because the officers of the court refused to let me into the court. And I came in my traditional wear because it is my constitutional right to do that. Under Article 149G of the Constitution, I have a right, as every other ethnicity in this country, to enter into the court traditionally attired. People don't stop people when they walk in there with a dhoti. They don't stop people when they walk in there with their traditional African or Chinese attire. But yet here we have an indigenous person dressed traditionally, and I'm being stopped. My rights are being violated. My constitutional rights are being violated.
And you see this as discrimination?
Absolutely. The Constitution talks about the right to live in a society that is free from discrimination, and the fact that this is happening, you don't see anyone else being stopped from going in there. I am the only indigenous person that has a stake in this. Yet
Sir,
I'm not being allowed to go in.
So you're speaking about your constitutional right, but the law also speaks about indecent exposure. Do you think that will apply to this case?
What is indecent exposure? Do you think that traditional attire is indecent exposure?
No, it's not what I don't.
Well, I'm asking you a
you.
question. What is indecent exposure? Do you see anything here exposed indecent?
I can see your butt, sir.
You cannot see my. You can see my cheeks. There's a difference. Do you think that is indecent? Do you think that indigenous?
No, I'm just
the
asking for
question
your
is,
take on it.
Do you think that indigenous attire is indecent? Because that's what the question boils down to.
I am not the one stopping you from entering the court,
You're not, but
sir.
you're asking a question that needs to be interrogated. It is my constitutional right. Am I not permitted to exercise my right?
No, we just want to know, why the change?
Thank you.
Mr. Schumann is allowed to go into the hotel.
Oh my, oh my, my, oh my. We're dancing in the streets.